My name's Ryan. And if you've ever wondered what it's like to be the extra puzzle piece that never quite fits, let me paint you a picture. It feels like attending your own funeral every Sunday, dressed in a smile you don't believe in. My parents were never cruel in the obvious ways. No yelling, no hitting. Just perfectly measured words, sharpened enough to cut without leaving visible marks. Every comparison to my sister, Emily, was another reminder that I was the rough draft they wished they could edit out. Emily, the golden child. The perfect smile, flawless report cards, the kind of person who could trip over her own ego and still get applause for the landing. Me, I was the quiet one. The he's doing his best kid. The forgotten trophy they only polished when company came over and asked about me. I learned early that love in our house was a performance and Emily was the headline act. I told myself if I worked hard enough, if I became someone worth noticing, they'd finally see me. But that day never came. Instead, came the night everything shattered, my dad's 60th birthday party. Hey everyone, before I go on, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button if you want to hear more stories like this one. It was supposed to be a family celebration. The backyard was full of laughter that didn't feel real. Aunts, uncles, old neighbors, and the kind of fake cheer that smells like barbecue smoke and disappointment. I showed up with a small gift, a silver pocket watch I'd saved up for. My dad loved old things. I thought maybe, just maybe, this time he'd notice the thought behind it. Then Emily arrived, 20 minutes late, glowing like the universe revolved around her. Her designer dress probably cost more than my rent, and yet somehow everyone clapped like royalty had just entered. Mom hugged her, so tightly I thought she might disappear into her. Our pride and joy is here, she said, and Dad laughed. The star of the family has arrived. I just stood there, holding that damn watch, invisible in a room full of people who shared my blood, but not my heart. Dinner began, and the stories flew. Emily's promotion, Emily's vacation, Emily's boyfriend who probably applauded himself in the mirror every morning. I tried to speak once or twice, but each time, someone talked over me. My voice didn't even register. I was a ghost at my own family's table. Then Aunt Linda, always the instigator, asked my parents how it felt to have such successful kids. Dad grinned, looked right at me, and said, "Well, we wish Emily was our only child, but what can you do?" Everyone laughed, like it was just another joke. Like those words didn't carve straight through me. Emily smirked. That tiny, victorious smirk I'd known my whole life. The one that said, "I win again." Mom added, "He knows we're kidding," and patted my arm like I was some slow-learning pet trying to take a hint. I just sat there, staring at the tablecloth, listening to their laughter echo inside my skull. I didn't cry, not then, not later. Tears felt too small for the kind of pain that settled in that night. I just smiled, stood up, and said softly, "Excuse me." Then I walked out into the cold air, feeling like I'd finally left the stage of a play I was never meant to be in. Behind me, I heard someone whisper, "Is he mad?" And another voice laugh, "Ryan's just sensitive." That was the last thing I heard before the door closed. I drove home in silence, streetlights flickering across the windshield like snapshots of every forgotten moment, birthdays missed, achievements ignored, every maybe next time branded into my memory. When I got home, I didn't scream, didn't break anything. I just sat down and started writing. Not revenge, not yet. Just truth. Every moment they'd made me feel small. Every time they'd chosen her over me. Every apology I'd given just to keep the peace. By 3 a.m., the list was long. Too long. And somewhere between hurt and exhaustion, I found something else. Clarity. If they wanted a life without me, they could have it. I'd spent my entire existence fighting to belong to a family that had already decided I didn't. So for once, I gave them what they always wanted, distance. The next morning, I sent a simple message. "Hey, I'll be stepping back from family events for a while. Need to focus on myself." And for the first time in my life, I actually meant it. "Take care," Mom replied. "Don't be dramatic." Dad said nothing. Emily sent a laughing emoji. That was it. I turned off my phone, blocked their numbers, deleted the family group chat, and for the first time ever, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. Over the next few days, I started cleaning my apartment, deleted old photos, packed away memories that still smelled like guilt. It was like pruning a dying tree, painful but necessary because something new was ready to grow. At work, I stopped apologizing for existing. I started asking for what I deserved. And to my surprise, people listened. Turns out, the moment you stop trying to be liked, you start getting respected. I thought that was where my story ended, finally standing on my own. But life has a way of showing up when you least expect it. A week later, I got a call from a lawyer I barely remembered, my grandfather's attorney. "Mr. Cole," he said, "your grandfather's estate has finally cleared. He left you his house and land in Oshri." I froze. "Wait, just me?" "Yes," the lawyer said. "Just you." His will was very specific. I couldn't even process it. Grandpa, the only one who ever saw me, who used to sneak me cookies when Mom wasn't looking, had left me everything. The house, the land, even a small trust for upkeep. That weekend, I drove to Oshri. The house sat quietly between the trees, sunlight pouring through the windows like forgiveness itself. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. I didn't tell anyone, not my parents, not Emily. Not yet. Because deep down, I wanted to see what would happen when they found out the one they dismissed inherited the very thing they thought was theirs by right. That night, sitting in Grandpa's old armchair, I poured myself a glass of his favorite whiskey and whispered, "You always saw me, didn't you?" And in the quiet creak of the house, it almost felt like he answered. I decided right then I wouldn't use this gift for revenge. Not yet. But I also wouldn't hide it. Because some lessons life teaches with words and some with silence. The week after the fallout, I kept my distance. No calls, no texts, no visits. At first they were annoyed. Then they grew worried. "Ryan, call us. Where are you? Stop being childish. And finally, if you keep this up, don't expect us to come crawling." I smiled when I read that, because they still didn't understand I wasn't waiting for them to crawl. I was already walking away. Days turned into weeks. I spent my time fixing up the house, repainting walls, restoring furniture, letting the place breathe again. And with every brushstroke, their voices grew quieter. One night, I sat on the porch under a sky full of stars and realized I didn't hate them anymore. I just didn't care. And that, I knew, would hurt them far more than any revenge I could plan. Because one day they'd realize what they'd lost, not just a son to mock, but the only one who ever loved them enough to stay despite the pain. I didn't need to lift a finger. Life was already writing their downfall, and the ink was dry. The silence lasted longer than I expected, and honestly, it was beautiful. No criticism, no comparisons, no reminders that I wasn't enough. Just quiet morning sunlight through old windows, birds singing outside, and the soft creak of wood floors like the house itself was stretching after a long sleep. For the first time, I wasn't the disappointment. I was free. I repainted the walls, fixed the old record player, and even started cooking again. Every breath of that familiar cedar air felt like it was stitching something inside me back together. For the first time in years, the silence in that house didn't ache, it healed. A few weeks passed before the first wave of news reached me. A voicemail from Aunt Linda, her tone sharp, dripping with gossip. "Ryan, did you hear? Your dad lost his job at the firm." I just stared at the phone, not because I was glad, but because I wasn't surprised. My father had always been proud, too proud. The kind of man who thought the world owed him applause just for showing up. Turns out, he'd been falsifying expense reports for years. When they found out, they fired him quietly, but the scandal wasn't quiet for long. His reputation was gone overnight. I didn't laugh. I didn't call. I just poured myself a cup of coffee and went back to sanding the porch railing. Because for once, life was balancing itself, and it didn't need my help to do it. A few days later, another message came. This time from my cousin Sam. "Bro, Emily's engagement is off." I almost dropped the mug. Apparently, her fiancé found out she'd been lying, telling everyone she had a trust fund coming from Grandpa's estate. She didn't, of course, because Grandpa left everything to me. But she'd been bragging about that fake inheritance for months. When her boyfriend realized she'd built her life on a lie, he walked out in the middle of dinner, left her crying in front of a restaurant full of people. That night, I sat on the porch listening to the crickets, thinking about the night of that family party, how she'd smirked when they all wished I didn't exist. And suddenly, I understood something Grandpa once told me. Karma doesn't need your help, just your patience. A week later, Mom called. First time in months. Her voice was trembling, but still trying to sound in control. Ryan, we need to talk. About what? Don't be like this. We're family. You made it clear family was optional, I said. She sighed. We didn't mean it. You know how your father jokes. I know exactly how he jokes, I said quietly. That's why I left. There was a long silence. Then she whispered, we're in trouble. Your father lost his job. Your sister's engagement fell apart. We might lose the house. I hope things work out, I replied. Ryan, this isn't funny, she snapped. It's not supposed to be, I said. It's just life catching up. Her voice broke. Please, we need your help. And I said the words I'd waited my whole life to say. You wished I didn't exist. So start living like it. Then I hung up. My hands were shaking, not from guilt, but from freedom. Years of being the scapegoat burned off like fog in sunlight. Messages started pouring in after that. Texts, voicemails from people who never saw me before. Ryan, can we talk? Please, we didn't mean it. But I stayed silent, because they had built their lives on the fantasy that I was disposable. And now, reality was finally collecting its debt. So I focused on the house, on rebuilding something that was mine. In Grandpa's old study, I found his journals, pages filled with reflections, thoughts, and pieces of wisdom. In one entry, he'd written, Ryan sees the world differently. But that's not a flaw, it's his gift. One this family will never understand. I cried quietly, not from sadness, but from peace. A few days later, the lawyer called. Mr. Cole, the transfer of assets is complete. All of them? I asked. Yes, including the financial accounts tied to the property. You're now the legal owner of everything. I thanked him, then just sat there, watching the old oak trees sway outside the window. For the first time in my life, I wasn't surviving. I was free. Of course, the news spread fast. Suddenly every distant relative wanted to catch up. We heard you inherited something, they'd say. Just memories, I'd reply. And that was enough to make them nervous. Within a month, my parents' situation crumbled further. Dad's debts came out. Mom's cards were maxed. Emily moved back home. Every new photo they posted online looked dimmer. Smiles stretched too thin, eyes too tired. I didn't feel revenge. I just watched life do what it always does, even the scales. One afternoon, I drove to their house. Not to gloat, just to see if I felt anything. The curtains were drawn. The yard was overgrown. The mailbox stuffed with unpaid bills. For a moment, I thought about knocking. But then I remembered all the times I'd stood at that same door as a kid, waiting to be let in, waiting to be loved. And I realized I'd done enough waiting for one lifetime. So I turned around and drove back home to my home. Oshri smelled like rain and redemption. That night, sitting by the fireplace Grandpa built with his own hands, I raised a glass and whispered, You were right again, old man. Because he once told me, people who wish you gone never expect to be left behind. Maybe that's the real revenge, not destruction, not cruelty, just absence. Absence so loud, it echoes in their guilt. The next morning, I found an envelope under my door. My name on the front, written in my mother's shaky handwriting. Inside, a letter. We're sorry, Ryan. We didn't realize what we were doing until it was too late. Please come home. I read it twice, folded it neatly, and set it beside Grandpa's photo on the mantel. This is home now, I whispered. The house creaked softly like it agreed. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing approval. I wasn't begging to belong. I just existed, whole, calm, and finally unbothered. They once wished me gone, but somewhere out there, they were finally learning what it truly meant to live without me. Months passed before the truth hit, like a storm no one saw coming. It started small. A Facebook post from a distant cousin. Congratulations, Ryan, on the beautiful Ashridge estate. Within hours, my phone blew up. Missed calls from Mom, a text from Emily, and a voicemail from Dad, his voice sharp with disbelief. Ryan, why didn't you tell us about the inheritance? Then another, angrier. That house was supposed to go to your sister. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because for once I got the joke. By evening, they were at my gate. All three of them, standing in the rain like ghosts from a painting. Dad's face red, Mom trembling, Emily clutching her phone like she could buy her way out of the past. Open the door, Ryan, Mom shouted. We just want to talk. I pressed the intercom. You talked enough at the party. Dad snapped back. This isn't fair. You manipulated him into leaving you everything. I didn't have to, I said. He just saw what you refused to see. Emily stepped forward, her voice soft but poisoned underneath. Come on, Ree. You don't even like old houses. This isn't you. Maybe you never knew me well enough to say that. Dad slammed his hand on the gate. We're your family. You made sure I forgot that years ago. The rain poured harder. Thunder cracked behind them, like applause from the universe itself. Then silence, until Mom whispered, Please, we're sorry. We didn't mean it. You meant it enough to say it in front of everyone. Tears rolled down her face. We've lost everything, Ryan. No, you lost me. Everything else followed. Emily shouted, You're cruel. No, I said. I'm finally honest. They stood there for a moment longer before turning away, headlights disappearing down the road, and I watched until the dark swallowed them whole. That night, I couldn't sleep, not from guilt, but from the strange lightness in my chest. Years of chasing their approval had finally burned away. But fate wasn't finished. The next morning, I got a call from Grandpa's lawyer. His tone was careful. Mr. Cole, your grandfather left one last message. What kind of message? I asked. A sealed letter for your parents, but he instructed me to deliver it only if they ever came to you asking for help. My heart skipped. You mean now? Exactly. He sent me a scan. Grandpa's handwriting, shaky but strong. To my son and his wife, if you're reading this, then you've finally learned that love cannot be withdrawn like money from a bank. You spent years hoarding affection and investing only in perfection, forgetting that real family is built on forgiveness, not favoritism. I left the house to Ryan because he earned it, not through success, but through survival. You have everything you ever wanted, except the one thing you threw away. Him. If you want him back, start by apologizing to yourselves. I stared at the letter, tears stinging my eyes, not from sadness, but from truth that had waited generations to be heard. I sent it, not out of revenge, but because I wanted them to feel what honesty sounds like when it's written in love they never understood. Days passed. Silence again. Then one evening, a soft, hesitant knock on the door. It was Emily, alone, eyes red, makeup ruined. She held that same letter. He loved you more than anyone, she whispered. We all knew it. We just hated you for it, because we wanted it too. I said nothing. I just listened. Dad's sick. Mom can't sleep. The house is gone. And all we do is talk about you. Now you know, I said, what it feels like to be the one they talk about, but never talk to. She cried. Please, can we start over? Do you remember that day at the party when you smirked? Yes. That was the moment I stopped needing a family. So, no, we can't start over. But maybe we can stop pretending. She nodded quietly and walked away, the sound of gravel under her shoes fading into the rain. I leaned against the door and realized I didn't hate her anymore, because hate is just love that stayed too long in pain. A week later, I got another letter. This one from my parents. We're sorry. You were always enough. We hope you find peace, even if it's not with us. I folded it, placed it beside Grandpa's photo, and whispered. I already did. Months passed. Word spread. My parents moved away. Emily found work in another city, and I stayed in Ashridge, renovating the house, building something real from the wreckage of false love. People sometimes ask if I ever forgave them, and the truth is yes. But forgiveness isn't an open door. It's the act of dropping the key and walking away. Then came the final twist. A year later, the lawyer contacted me again. Final update to the estate, he said. Your grandfather added one last condition. Upon your death, the property will go not to your family, but to a local orphan foundation under your name. I laughed, loud and free, because it was perfect. A legacy not of bitterness, but of breaking the cycle. I walked outside, sunset glowing through the trees, and whispered, You did it, old man. Because somehow, he'd written the ending before I ever lived it. My family once wished me gone, and it destroyed them. Now they'll have to live knowing the son they cast aside turned his pain into something that would outlive them all. That night, I locked the gate, not in anger, but in peace, because this house no longer carried our history. Only proof that even the unwanted can become unforgettable. And if anyone ever asks me whether revenge feels good, I'll tell them this. It doesn't, but freedom does. And sometimes they look the same when you finally stop bleeding. Outro. What do you think about this story? Let me know in the comments below. Drop a like. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that cut deep.